So I remember the morning that he was diagnosed, and I just remember staring out the window with my voice shaking, asking if we could get an appointment for blood work, and just feeling really scared. I remember laying in bed next to him and just begging the Lord to heal his body, and that it wasn't what I thought it was.
When Jesus comes into our life, he gives us one specific promise that forever changes us. This one promise is ours to use on a daily basis in big and small ways, in practical or complex seasons of our life. His promise is the assurance that no part of our life has been wasted. We see it perhaps most clearly in Romans chapter 8. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those who he justified, he also glorified. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? There is an absolute assurance offered to us in Jesus and revealed to us throughout the course of our entire life. That assurance is the certainty that God loves us just as much now as he always has and always will. No matter how bad it gets on the outside or the inside of us, he still loves us. There is not one thing you have done, will do, or could do that could possibly bring you back into condemnation. Why? Because the debt has been paid, finally, fully. So it's not enough to say God uses our life if he does not also design it. In fact, I believe what God permits, he permits for a reason. And that reason is his design. If God foresees cells mutating into a malignant tumor, or allows a tsunami to wipe out an entire village, when he allows a young Christian wife to walk dangerously close to the edge of an affair, and he doesn't stop it, what are we to say? When Satan and his demons are permitted to wreak havoc on this earth, bringing devastation and ruin to so many, what are we to do? When an innocent, perfect son begs his father to rescue him from a horrific, terrible death that he does not deserve, and yet his father does not stop it from happening, where are we to turn? Although we are afflicted in every way, we are not crushed. Perhaps we are perplexed, but not driven to despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. We hold on to the treasure within us, reminding us that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. Deuteronomy 32:4 reminds us that we are never to dumb down the depths of riches and wisdom of the knowledge of God, his unsearchable judgments, and his inscrutable ways to random evil or meaningless events. We do not dare call God evil or sinful in the governing of this universe, because his work is perfect. All his ways are just. He is a God of faithfulness and without iniquity. He is just and upright. Nothing exists apart from the perfect will of God. Not the evil in this world, not our sin, not Satan's schemes. Everything exists through Jesus, by Jesus, for Jesus, to show us that Jesus is exactly who he says he is. In AD 33, the worst sin ever committed was the ultimate display of God's glory through the death of his Son. In putting Jesus to death, the dark night of this world was finally and fully dismantled, bringing glory to the very thing that Satan meant to destroy. The same will be true for you as it is for me. All of our life's dismantling, an addiction that leads us to rock bottom, or a secret that's exposed, that loneliness that grieves you, that achieving that exhausts you, her rejection, his betrayal, all of it will eventually be seen for what it truly is, the goodwill of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. Our worst day, our most horrific pain, our most desperate darkness will be used to the glory of God. In fact, our entire life is a divine setup for us to be sure of this truth. Nothing that has happened to us or through us is a mistake or an accident. And God takes no pleasure in our pain, but he sure does purpose it, because he didn't stop it for me or you or for millions of people throughout history. He has a purpose for it. And if we don't believe our life is designed and purposed by God, we will waste it.
My husband Brock was an overachiever in every sense of the word. He was an incredible man. He worked out 5 days a week, ran triathlons. He would put all of us to shame. In the first 3 hours of the day, he accomplished more than I thought about doing in the next 10. I have sweet pictures of him in the morning before 6 a.m. sitting on the couch with our early rising child. They're reading the Bible together at 5:45 in the morning, and mom's still sleeping. The day that he was diagnosed, we got a call from his doctor, and he was immediately admitted to the cancer unit at the local hospital. So we began treatment right away, and it was the start of what ultimately would be a 3-year process. I really believe that the Lord was going to use this because of this man who is faithful to the Lord and loves him, and he's going to use our family in this way, and Brock's going to be healed and come out of this on the other side. Brock was in Houston for 3 months for the stem cell transplant, which was intense. And then he got to come home back to Bryan. There's a huge celebration for that, and we made it there, and he came home and got to be back with our family. It was still going to be a hard road, but things were looking good. So after he'd had the best blood work he'd had in 2 years, and we poured a slab on our forever home, we went back in for just some routine blood work and sat in his doctor's office, and she delivered the news that the leukemia had returned, which is worst case scenario after a stem cell transplant. 2 weeks later, holding his hand as he took his last breath and watching the line go flat on the monitor. So later that day, I rode home from Houston thinking about how I'm going to tell my 8 and 6 and 3-year-old that their dad isn't coming back.
One of my favorite verses in all of the Bible tells us that our times and seasons are fixed by God's authority. tells us that He has determined our allotted periods and boundaries and our dwelling places. Why? That we should seek God and perhaps feel our way toward Him and find Him. I want us to notice what it takes to find God. Some versions of that verse use the word to grope in place of feel. I actually love this word better. I love the visual imagery of us groping our way toward God through this beautiful, tragic life. In either translation, the Greek word for feel is the same as to handle or to touch on the surface, to discover through personal investigation. Just like our Greek word teaches, the feeling we experience in a specific event is real and present. It's a point-in-time action, but from God's perspective, it's also unbound from human time. The experience and the person is meant to draw us in to the central action of what God is doing, His eternal work. And the feelings, as far as God is concerned, are unbound by human definition. They're more intricate and complex than can be summed up in any one language or in any one part of our upbringing or race or religious beliefs. But at the same time, our feelings are simple enough for us to all connect in the same way. We all feel anger, we all feel anxiety, shame, happiness, despair, sadness. Now, I like talking about my feelings just about as much as a low-carb diet, but I adore serving a God who does not dismiss or downplay the most uncomfortable, intricate parts of me like other humans do. I love that God wants to acknowledge and talk about the dark places of loss and grief and sadness, places that I may be sabotaging intimacy within me and around me. I'm so grateful that God chooses every person and every place throughout the entire course of my life to uproot and resurface any feeling that is not completely relying on Him. Because, to be honest, I would never choose that course on my own. I love that even when I don't have the words to describe what I'm feeling or I'm struggling to pray, the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. Romans 8:26. God is using wherever we are, right this very minute, to draw us to Himself. He is using our location on the map, our specific time in history, our biological or adoptive parents, the people who raised us, and every experience in our life to speak to us, setting us up to feel our way to Him. And yes, because people are complicated and places are always changing, it often feels like groping our way to Him. Like me, you may have to kick and scream your way into it, or stay ticked off through most of it. However you're feeling your way toward Him, don't stop. You are closer than you think.
So over the next 8 months, I worked to get our house finished and sold the house we were living in and moved our family to the home that Brock and I had designed for our family of 5. And we moved in as a family of 4 instead. We were putting one foot in front of the other, and just 14 months after he died and 6 months after moving in our home, the house was struck by lightning one morning and started a fire, and we lost almost everything that day. I've been widowed at 35 and had 3 small children to raise by myself, and was now tasked with picking up the pieces after a house fire without Brock around to help do any of it. So nothing about my life is what I expected it to look like. I feel paralyzed sometimes by grief and sadness, my own and my children's. I feel like throughout the whole thing, the Lord's been faithful to us, and that hasn't looked like easy days. It's trusting that the Lord is with me and he sees me, and I'm truly not alone because of him.
When God speaks, our heart cannot help but be drawn and intrigued and compelled to attention. For only God speaks with the authority of eternity to the place within us that is the whole picture of our past, present, and future as they matter to heaven. Never forget that this life is just one big setup. As God, He has every right to abandon us when we forget His faithfulness, but in His mercy, He chooses instead to discipline us, to bring us back to Himself, to use all of His divine power and resources to shock, stun, traumatize us if necessary, back into the reality that His love is the only love we are designed to trust completely. God knows that the closer we are to Him, the closer we are to who we are meant to be. And He proves this over and over again inside of our story. Our ever-changing scenes and setting and characters, all through our heroes and villains, in our comedic blunders, and in the rise and fall of our climactic events. If He wanted to, God could just stop us from doing something stupid. He's strong enough, wise enough. He's able to see the road we cannot. He could simply take away all of our fun or scold us, put us in timeout. He could put up a gate to imprison us inside of His will. But God doesn't want us to simply believe in Him. He wants us to believe Him, to trust that His way really is the best way, and that when He asks us to obey Him, He does so only from love and always for our good.
It's really digging deep into trusting the Lord with this life that I didn't plan for. I didn't ask for this one. My kids ask me lots of hard questions, and when my son asks me why 2 really rare bad things have happened to our family, I don't have answers for him. But what I do know is true is that the Lord is faithful and He's unchanging, and He loves us, He sees us, and we're not forgotten.